All right, everybody. Welcome back to another week of It's the Democracy Stupid. Another wonderful week, right? We have a lot to talk about, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Jen Bendery. She is a senior politics reporter for HuffPost. She's covered Congress and the White House for what, Jen, a decade and a half?
20 years.
20 years. Wow. She's also a Minnesotan, so we'll talk about that as well.
I'm not Minnesotan. I've
Oh,
been there. I've been there for reporting, but I'm
you've been
not
there for
from
reporting.
Minnesota.
Well,
Yes.
that's okay. My
Yes.
apologies.
To be clear. Yeah.
Well, let's start with the very big news that broke just now about the Supreme Court um, uh, telling Donald Trump he simply does not have the authority to impose tariffs on everybody everywhere in the world. What's the reaction you've heard so far?
The reaction I've heard so far is that Trump is pissed. He's very mad that the
Well,
court that he believes is there for him did not rule in his favor. Of course, he's pissed. It's also, it's a ruling that seemed. I'm no expert, but it seemed fairly obvious that he can't do what he's doing, and it just took forever for the court process to go through all this and tell him, "Yep, you can't do that."
right.
So that's
So he's pissed, which we knew because
yeah,
anytime he's told you can't, he's angry.
right.
Um, but how about members of Congress? How about all these people who've been standing behind him cheering? Any peep from any of these pipsqueaks?
I did see something from. It's still a little early. It
Yeah,
takes
yeah,
them time to come up with things to say to thread that balance between saying what they think and not pissing off Trump. I did see something from Chuck Grassley that I was kind of surprised by. He's the chair of the Judiciary Committee, so very
yes.
powerful committee. He put out a statement saying he basically trying to toe the line between saying Congress has a constitutional role over commerce. So, I've been here for decades in the Senate. I remember when this law passed in 1977, but he also said, Trump is also a very skilled negotiator, and I want him to continue being successful. So I hope he keeps negotiating on trade deals. So it's one of these this is how they all respond
This
to
is how
him.
they're going to do it.
They have to say they have to word it just so, but they'll say, "Oh, it's true that you don't have the right to do that, but also you're so skilled at negotiating. Keep negotiating. We got you." So it's just like more of the same, more suck up and more trying to sort of point out that the ruling is right, but also like no shame, Mr. President.
Yeah. Well, that president is covered in shame. I mean, this is billed as a blow to his economic agenda, but
Yes,
he's
it
really
is.
been using it as a foreign policy cudgel, as a way of extorting what he wants from countries. So I think it's central to his coercive view of the world. We have a State of the Union coming up, Jen, and a lot of people aren't going to show up, and the people who are less likely to be well behaved. I mean, this is going to be different than I think many of the states of the union we've seen. What are you hearing about how people are planning on approaching it?
Well, I'm going to take a slightly different perspective on that because I feel like
Good.
the State of the Union has devolved over the years
Hmm.
from a standpoint of decorum and substance and on a more existential level, like on its purpose at all.
Hmm.
So I don't feel like this year will be that much different than years past, at
Okay.
least with Trump being president. Um, there have been really offensive, out of line, inappropriate things said and done, to make scenes at this address. I don't, I mean, I've been asked this question already, literally today, about like what's going to happen. What do you expect? And I'm like, I expect more of the same. Like every year, I feel like it's at least from DC. It's like here we go again. It's another State of the Union, and here we go again with Democrats looking for ways to show a sign of protest against Trump, and how can they do it? Be more creative. Are they going to piss off their constituents by attending? Should they attend at all? Should they all walk out? What kind of protest should they make? Republicans are going to go there and just clap for everything. And it just feels like so routine that we've been doing this every year, and they just, what's going to happen now? And it's gotten to me as someone who has to like cover this every year, what is the point of this anymore anyway? Like, do people really tune into the State of the Union? And I say this sincerely, like, are there people across America tuning into the State of the Union who are like, I am very interested to hear the president's take on where we are at this moment in time as a country and what the president's policy plans are for the coming year. It doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like, can we say bad words on your show, Edwin? I don't know what the rules are here, but I'm going to try to
hear from the radio, so no.
Okay, so I'm going to try to like be a little more thoughtful about how I put this, but it feels like it's a very performative exercise that has next to no substance, and that we're all really looking at this, if we're paying attention at all, to see what kind of stunts each party will pull to like have a gotcha or to send a message.
No, I'm so sorry to hear that. I mean, I've been watching these my whole life, and as you can see, it's a long life, and I remember many of them. And I remember some of them being tons of substance. I mean, Bill Clinton.
Yeah. Right. What year was that? 1990. What was that?
I know, but
we're here in 2026.
Barack offered a lot of substance about policies he wanted.
What year was that?
Yeah, it's been a while. I know.
Yeah.
I know. But this year, I think a lot of Dems aren't going to show up, or they've said they're not going to show up. So this trend that you're talking about has gone on a long time, but this now feels like we have a little bit less, like you have one country, a president giving a talk and a loyal opposition pointing out what's wrong with it, than you have, and these aren't parties anymore. You have MAGA, who thinks the president is a king, and much of the rest of the president doubting his legitimacy anymore.
Yeah, and I think that in years past, Democrats, when it's been Trump as president, some Democrats just don't go as their show of like, I don't agree with anything going on. I'm part of the resistance. I'm rejecting all of this.
Yep.
Some have gone, and I remember they wore all white one year as a way of sending a message.
Yep.
They've had signs. I think they had signs last year.
Signs.
And some Democrats got made fun of for that because they're like walking around holding signs like this is not normal.
Signs they could have had.
But then it's kind of like, well, what are they supposed to do? And then for me, again, it gets back to this point of like, what are we even doing? Like, why are we doing this? Is it really just a parade of making statements and not really talking about policy anymore? Because in this moment, I'm not sure that there's I don't see policy, a thoughtful policy conversation coming out of this. So then what are we doing?
Well, here's what I think. This is a time when there could be an enormously interesting conversation about policy in America. We have some really huge problems, and we want our government to deal with them. So the president should stand up there and say, okay, well, here's my view of what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong and how we're going to double down next year. I fear that he's going to stand up there and say, the Democrats are trying to steal the next election. All these illegals are out there. I need you to pass the SAVE Act. I need you to go further. I need the power to run elections. And I think that's going to be his playbook. And that scares me to death.
That scares me too, because there's certainly been discussion about, all the ICE operations happening around the country. Like, is this a precursor to something that is actually like building up toward the elections, where they're going to station ICE agents outside of all these polling stations and in swingy areas and scare people from coming out? Like, yes, that scares me too. I also don't know how realistic that is given the number of ICE agents there are at all. Like, I don't understand like how that could be rolled out on a mass scale.
I don't think we will have elections, Jen.
You don't think we will?
No, I think we will.
Oh, we will have. Yes.
And I think the votes will get counted. I think they will. Here's where I think could be a problem. If you have an election that's close and they're going to count the ballots the next day and the day after. We already saw last time in Arizona where people tried to break in and stop that. And I think there will be places in the country where people break in and stop it. But the way we run elections, by and large, there will be free and fair elections all over the country. There will be problems for sure, but they will be limited. And And I expect when Democrats win seats that Speaker Johnson will seat them.
Yes, so do I.
Yeah.
I do too. And he also looks on track to lose control of the House
I
in
agree.
November. So that will happen. I mean, I think that's going to happen. I mean,
Yeah,
the game of predictions in politics these days feels
dangerous.
like very dangerous. But I will say this is one where, barring something extraordinary, Democrats are on track historically to
Yes.
take the House back. Never mind in this moment how voters are feeling, but historically, it's a pendulum, right?
Yeah.
It's always swinging back and forth between different parties and presidents and chambers of Congress, and Democrats are due for a win in the House. And if they do, I think that's a game changer from there on out.
I agree. What do you make of Trump's efforts? Annually, the president meets with the governors, right? And he said, I'm only meeting with Republican governors. Then he got beat up and he caved and he said, okay, I'll meet with all the governors. But Wes Moore, the only black governor, you're not invited to spend any time with me. And Jared Polis, how dare you not pardon one of my criminals in your state? You're not invited. Like, does anybody care anymore about stuff like that in Washington? And the country actually doesn't like it. But in Washington, do people care about that stuff?
I think the question isn't so much like, do people care? Let's say I will take the mantle of the voice of people in Washington, I guess. In this moment, represent everybody in Washington.
Yeah, but you talk to them.
I talked to some of the many, many people in Washington, but I will accept this challenge right now. I think that I think the question is really, I think people do care, but there's this, and I think beyond DC people recognize this. There's just this feeling of a constant onslaught of news and fresh dystopian hell every day that you can care about things, but you don't have, we wake up every day with a set amount of energy to look around us and to learn news and talk about things and have ideas. And then you go to bed and you can't, there's a capacity issue here. And this administration is notorious for just throwing everything out all the time. And it's almost intentional. I'm not sure how much of it is like calculated versus just like sheer idiocy, just flying everywhere. But yes, people care about all these things. It's just, you can't, you can take a stand on one and then there's 4 more things blowing up.
Yeah,
and so it's like, what do you,
it's making up their mind.
Yeah.
Cumulative weight.
But I think people do care. And I think there will be a moment of reckoning when the dust settles. I don't think we can continue at this. This is just my take on this. We can't continue operating at this level as humans and as a global conversation. We can't keep operating like this forever. Something has to dissipate at some point, and we will be in a pile of ashes, and we will look back and say, let's take note of what just happened. And there will be key moments and key things to look at. And so I think, back to your question, do people care about these developments? Yes. Yeah. Is there a bandwidth right now to like fully focus on these things? Yeah. You can't, it's just not available right now,
Okay. I want to switch and talk about ICE a little bit in Minnesota with you. You wrote a piece about children in ICE detention. And I wonder, it's like they've taken more kids than most of the country knows, than the ones who became famous. Could you talk a little bit about that? I thought it was remarkable.
Well, I mean, there are children being snapped up all over. We don't hear about it. It's the ones that, we can all hear about, where you get like a little window into what's going on. But there's a facility that you've probably heard of. It's in Texas. It's called the Dilley, the ICE detention center, Dilley, Texas. Mm-hmm. This one stands out from a lot because it's a family residential, or not residential, good Lord, it's a family detention center. So children are there with parents. A lot of ICE facilities don't have children, but that one does. And so it's sort of a hub of kind of like the most horrific of horrors. I mean, there's horror to be found in all of these facilities. This one involves little children. There's one 2-month-old that's been in the news recently a 2-month-old baby who was sick in a facility, and then they were deported while the baby was still sick. This is the same facility where Liam Ramos was being held, the 5-year-old from Minneapolis, who we all saw his photo that kind of snapped people awake about some real faces on what's going on here. he was only one of 6 kids in his own school district who were in the facility. In fact, it's so bad in Liam Ramos's particular school district, which is in a Minneapolis suburb, that one kid from that school district was nabbed by ICE and shipped off to Dilley. And then while that kid was there, that kid recognized another kid in the facility from their school district who was missing, and no one knew where they were. And then the kid was like, oh, like that's Johnny or whatever. Like, you know, and that's how they figured out this other child was there, because this other kid recognized them from their school. So it's like, this is where we're at. And, you know, maybe you've seen some of the drawings. I think ProPublica maybe did an expose where they had a series of drawings from children who were in the facility, sort of drawing how they're feeling and what they're seeing. And they're just, the whole thing is devastating. And when you see kids drawing pictures of being scared and in a prison, it's like, that's when it really gets you, you know? And so it's still happening. It's happening without us knowing where they are. It's just that we get these glimpses of some of the kids that shows us, oh, that's happening. It's like, well, multiply that by 10 or 100. That's how many more kids this is happening to that we just don't know about.
And these detention facilities aren't, I mean, you said this one is for families, but they're not designed for the welfare of any of these kids.
Oh my God, not at all. I mean, at least I can speak to Dilley, because that's one where I really focused on. I mean, there's widespread reporting about how the food is contaminated. The food is disgusting. The water isn't right. There's no ability to go to the bathroom. People are just like vomiting on the floor. It's like just the most rank of conditions. And these are children in there. And if you use Liam Ramos as sort of a face for many, you know, he went in there and within days he was sick. You know, there was a photo that Representative Joaquin Castro, a Texas Democrat, shared because he visited Liam in there. He showed a photo of Liam laying on his father's lap in there, just like pale and lifeless. Terrible. He looked horrible. And if you juxtapose that photo next to the one we all saw of him with his, you know, his bunny ears and his Spider-Man backpack, if you just looked at those two photos next to each other, which were, you know, days apart, it was that, you know, you have to kind of get thick skin when you're covering this stuff. That is the kind of stuff that like breaks me, because you just see the before and after of like, this was like 3 days ago. And then you see this child like limp and just, he slept the whole time that Representative Castro was even trying to meet with him. He had a fever. His stomach was bad. He had diarrhea. And this was just one kid that we all heard about. But you have to remember that it's only because the spotlight's on that one that we can extrapolate. Well, we know there's hundreds of other kids in there. So if he got sick that quickly in there, we know, and we're hearing reports of rotten food and stomach bugs. And then they had a freaking measles outbreak in Dilley, which, come on, it's sort of like the pinnacle of this administration. This is the American way, you know, put
American
children.
They're hideous.
Yes.
And I you know what we're going to see. We're going to see that there's going to be rampant sex abuse. There's going to be all kinds of things we're going to learn about in these places because there's such limited oversight. I mean, the crimes are they're crimes that we haven't seen in a long time, and we saw them in Europe 100 years ago. But that's so disgusting. Does it? When you talk to people in Minneapolis, do they feel like the siege has ended?
No, not at all. No, and in fact, I'm doing some reporting right now. I interviewed Jacob Frey, who's the mayor of Minneapolis, and no, I mean, the residents I have from my reporting there, I have now established some pretty good relationships with a number of people there who I checked with and see like, how are things this week? You know, has anything changed? And it's been about a little over a week since Tom Homan, the border czar, made his big announcement, like, we're withdrawing from Minnesota. We're pulling out our surge of like 3,000 federal immigration enforcement agents. It's over, blah, blah. And he said in his announcement last week on Thursday, this withdrawal is beginning immediately and it will run through next week. So fast forward to today, it's now been the time frame when he said this is going to be over. They're still there. I don't know how many. the mayor of Minneapolis told me he doesn't know how many because ICE doesn't share its data with the mayor. They have only anecdotal information in the mayor's office. And they said they can see, on the one hand, that the way they track their own ICE activity incidents, there's been a drop. So that's good. But they also know that people are still calling in to 911 with reports of things going on, or they are separate from Jacob Frey, the mayor. I've talked to people who say 1000% it does not feel any different. I have not spoken to people literally today, but just a few days ago, several, like a school board chair in a Minneapolis suburb who I talked to was like, no, absolutely not. Everything feels the same. This other guy I talked to who's on the kind of the front lines of a resistance in his community, he said, we've noticed anecdotally that there are some drops in people being nabbed on the streets, but they're still there. And so this is like a weird gray area right now that I'm literally trying to drill down into, like, what's happening? This is supposed to be when they're gone. I mean, at its base level, Minnesota had about 150 ICE agents in the state. Okay. The surge brought in 3,000. So my question is, here we are at the end of this week. Are we back to 150 now? Are we still at 2,000? I mean, it's a huge, huge gap. So no, the short answer is the mayor said it doesn't feel like this is over. And individual residents who I've talked to in various parts of the city are like, there's something changing, but no, it's definitely not over.
This administration does not feel the public has a right to know.
Well, that's the thing. And so I mean, is there some way to know that we can know as the public, like how many ICE agents are still in Minneapolis? So I literally reached out to ICE and DHS today, said, hi, can you give me a sense of how many are left? We'll see if they respond. But for me, my finger on the pulse is talking to actual people on the ground who are involved, regular people who wake up every day and take part in ICE patrols with their neighbors, because their immigrant neighbors are so scared to leave their homes that some literally haven't left home in 8 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, here in Chicago, as in Minneapolis and St. Paul, people bring food.
Oh, 100%. There's like schools and churches have turned into warehouses of food where volunteers come in and they pick up shipments, that other people have bought, drive them over to immigrants' homes, leave them on the front steps, send them a message, your food is here, and then they leave because the immigrants who live in these homes still don't come outside for the food.
Yeah, I am hoping that in the response to the State of the Union, somebody stands up and says, my fellow Americans, the state of America is so much stronger than anybody knew. We were attacked. They took their troops in our cities, and we stood up. We stood for each other. We stood for the rule of law. We weren't going to get pushed around. America is a whole lot stronger and more resilient than any fascist thinks.
I think that what you just articulated is exactly what's happened in Minneapolis. I think I have never seen a community rise up like that ever in my years of reporting protests and, rallies. And, we've seen all kinds of organic uprisings and organized uprisings in the last 10 years, against Trump. But the Minneapolis community is, it sounds cliche, but it's like they're so strong and resilient. And they're like, we're never, you can talk to people on the street. They're like, oh, yeah, we're never giving up. We're never stopping this.
I mean, it happened in Chicago, too. And ICE's presence here was a lot smaller than in Minneapolis. And we're a lot bigger city.
That's right.
And yet we reacted in the same way. And then they thought, well, we'll double down. We'll have a whole lot more troops. We'll take on a smaller city. And every lesson we learned in Chicago, they improved upon in Minneapolis. And it was just beautiful fun.
It is. It's a strange concurrent feeling of like disgust at what's happening. And then like
and pride,
freaking pride, that's right. But it's like two completely opposite things happening at the same time that really just stir up so many complicated feelings.
Yeah. But this is a moment I know that has consequences for partisan politics, but it doesn't feel like Democrat versus Republican. It feels like America versus MAGA. And that's not quite the same thing. It's not. A lot of people who aren't Democrats were standing in the street helping out.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about in Chicago
and in Minneapolis.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I've talked to people who previously, like prior, so the surge in Minneapolis began in December, and then it really ticked up in January. There are people there who I've seen reporting on and who I've talked to who were like, I've never been politically engaged at all. I've never been sort of activated to, be at a protest or a rally, and they're out there now, like with their signs and not just standing there, like actually engaging and talking to people and shouting. And it's like, the word activated is something that I've talked a lot about with people in Minneapolis. So my questions to them have been like, tell me about the moment you became activated, because something switched at some point for a lot of people. And they were like, that's it. I'm done. Like, this is not normal on a new level. And I can't just do the same things anymore. No. And it's
for a lot of early Americans, it was the news of the slaughters, in Lexington and Concord, and people standing up, and they said, oh, you know what? It's time to get my musket. And we have about just a couple minutes left, Jenna. I'm wondering about accountability in Minnesota. The state legislature is considering some bills. I know the local prosecutors continue to see if they have any ability to hold accountable the murderers, I'm going to just say it, of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. Are those efforts in the state continuing to move forward?
Well, so yesterday, a number of Democratic state senators in Minnesota held a press conference, and they announced that they are unveiling a package of new bills, all aimed at reining in, as they put it, barbaric ICE actions in their state. And it's sort of their response to like what has been happening there and like preventing this from ever happening again. They gave a pretty fiery press conference, understandably, about the need for these bills. They have bills, they have 5 bills that they're going to actively start pushing now. One of them would prevent law enforcement officers from wearing masks while performing official duties. One would sort of protect schools and hospitals, quote unquote, like essential spaces, from immigration enforcement activity. So school children aren't freaking terrorized at school, and people in the hospital aren't too scared to get medical attention. One of their bills would actually allow residents to sue individual federal agents for monetary damages if they violate their civil rights or their constitutional rights. That one is interesting. And there's another one that would require the state's Criminal Investigative Bureau to be able to investigate all federal agents involved in incidents in the state where they kill Minnesota residents. So these are all very clearly tied to things that have happened in the last couple of months. The question is, what happens now with these bills being unveiled? They sound good. They address specific things. These are sort of the first front line of bills they want to move on because they're the most focused on safety issues. In Minnesota, Democrats control the Senate.
But not the House.
But the House is, I've learned recently, is evenly tied. Yeah. It's like 67 to 67. So the way that works, they need like one Republican to vote with them on any of these bills in order for it to move. But because these bills are starting in the Senate, they're all, I believe today, they're already having hearings on the bills they introduced yesterday because they can. So they're getting going in the Senate with their bills. The question is what happens when they go to the House. I would like to think there's at least one Republican who agrees with the sentiments of some of these bills, all of the bills, because again, an ICE operation in your state like this, can
radicalize people.
An invasion, maybe you want to call it, doesn't have much to do with being a Republican or a Democrat. It's pretty genuinely terrifying to see neighbors being taken off the streets and just the fear and trauma everywhere. So I have to believe that at least some of these bills will find some Republican support in the House and move. And of course they have Tim Walz is the governor, Democrat. So he'll sign whatever he can get. So we'll see. This is like a new
interesting, Jen. I mean, these questions we are redefining the balance of powers in America. Donald Trump said, no, I have all of them. And different parts of our government, not Congress, but other parts of our government are saying, no, you don't. And so that's just a very interesting time in our democracy. I really appreciate your time and your reporting. Listen, everybody, HuffPost, Jen Bendery. You can find her on social media as well as at HuffPost. She is terrific, as you just heard. Jen, thank you.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Bye.